Hi. In workshops, I think what's equally interesting to the output is the process to get there and the conversations that leads to such outputs. And I think in our group we had a very productive and empowering conversation throughout those 2 days. We started with the concept of social diversity that I originally introduced more in sort of social segregation of the city and potentially caused by processes like gentrification in the city and other various political processes. But I think when we talk about social diversity and various social segregation within cities, we might not contain ourselves to a strictly territorially imposed segregation with some neighborhoods that are more excluded than others, and some population read through their social classes that gets excluded through this process. We very quickly differed from this reading of the city and tried to talk about another form of segregation and another form of domination within cities, which is through the gendered approach of reading the city. It starts with a strict practice of the city and who gets to do what in the city, and quite often we realize that gendered becomes a strong dimension in separating those who can do a certain amount of things, in this case men, at least cisgender men, let's say, on the other hand, women at large and non-gendered conforming persons in general. The practice of the city. So I mean, you know, we start. The very first thing we talked about was, and maybe I should say as well that it's also a turn we took from social diversity, because quite simply we wanted to talk about that, and I think that's also an important component besides a sort of rational argument for it. And so, if we look at the way we practice the city, we might see who gets to sit in the city, who gets to stop in the city, and when we do stop, and when we do see women stopping, how we might see a different way of stopping the city. One that's that we might define as the male appropriation of space, as you can see in this work by Marianne Wex in the 1960s, but I think that still applies very much in the way we use our bodies in the city. But we also talk about a little bit more specific things, and the notion of the necessity of a safe spaces in the context specifically of places where women may be in particularly fragile situation. So we talk about abortion clinics, for example. I mean, you know, with the most extreme examples of them being in the United States, with protesters to abortion, harassing and intimidating women who might use the service of abortion clinics. So some things that are extremely spatial, but we also talked about the male imaginary of the city, and something as simple as the streets names, for example, being mostly attributed to male figures, and we'll get back to that in a minute. We also looked at design itself, talking about design and how design tends to be built around a very normatized body that tends to be the male standardized body usually, but also with inclusion sometimes of a female standard body, but to assign a woman to a very particular function. I mean, we talked about things like the kitchen, with the graphic standards that still exist with those what they call human dimensioning and what Henry Dreyfus was calling human engineering even. talking about how female bodies might be affected by design, but also how designers themselves, who happens to be women, were for a very long time attributed dimensions of design that were extremely restrictive in the sort of objects or architectures that could be created out of it. You know, I mean, we might just think of the example of Charlotte Perriand versus Le Corbusier. Charlotte Perriand doing all the furniture that we now know because we had a sort of work to rehabilitate her work. We can think also, I mean, staying in France, I'm sorry, someone like René Gaillustet, who did incredible housing projects that have been completely forgotten to the detriment of her former partner, Paul Renaudy. And we can see how conversation as recent as the opening of the Venice Biennale of Architecture this year is still occupied mostly by male figures. So that's a sort of representative within the design world, but that's something we can attribute to the more to the world of governmentability as well, and we wondered what are the methods of decision making that women can seize. The first one being voting in the political sector, and something that we should not denigrate too fast, because, you know, voting is so useless and all that, because actually women had to fight for a very long time to obtain this right. And we can see how parliaments are still extremely, and the ensemble, the totality of, the quasi-totality of decision makers are still very much male positions. And that's where we got an interesting turning point as well, which is to realize that when some women, and here we have Theresa May as a very good example, are being put in positions of power, they might actually end up taking decisions that are very much comparable to their male counterpart, and that's where maybe we make the difference between the sort of men-woman difference, and to favor a separation that has more to do with the male domination on the one hand and the sort of feminist resistance on the other. And maybe to finish my own part of the introduction of this project by using a very witty and smart and subversive little project that consisted in taking the subway map of New York City and attributing to each station the name of a famous New Yorker, female New Yorker, from you know, people you would expect like Hannah Arendt or Eleanor Roosevelt to Alicia Keys and Lady Gaga. So with various feminist imaginaries that might emerge from it, and I think that very much drove the spirit of the project that will be presented to you right now. So thank you.
Okay, so we have this saying which we all know, that behind every successful man there is a woman. And this came from what we actually wanted to do with what we are proposing, is basically to put women in front, just to make this change that there still are men, but women have some stand. This came from talking about spaces and how women can co-create them more, especially in cities. So we proposed this initiative called Gynecocracy. What is it about? This would be our web page. This is mock-up web page. So one part of it is show us what you have done. Speak up about the stuff you have done but have not been acknowledged for. So we have many projects, for example, in architecture and stuff, where the credit always goes to the male leads, and rarely the women in the team are acknowledged for it. So this is one part. The second part is, if you see there is an improvement to be made in the city to be more inclusive of women, make a suggestion what this can actually be. So, co-create your space. How to do it? So we have this nice sign. You can draw this sign to any artifact or to posters, to projects, to whatever you can make a sticker and put it on. Take a photo of it with R2B app. Describe why you are putting it on there, why is this a problem, why this hurts you, and hit send to upload. And all of this would be then collected in the website. This is how the stories would look like. So, as you see in the first one, we draw a design to the DESIGN BIOTOP because it's a really nice project created mainly by ladies here. We also time-stamped it and location-stamped it. Why? Is because if we return back to the city, so this is how it's done. You can also use lipstick and stuff, whatever you have at hand. You can actually get a map of where these suggestions, so where are the spaces where women feel the least included in this city, and also to have all the collection of really good practices and the projects, the artifacts that we are neglecting to see, and to give women more voice and more space to be seen and heard and acknowledged. This is from us.